What if the very thing meant to save your life actually puts it in grave danger? Imagine you are lying on the operating table, your coronary heart pounding with hope and fear, and you understand that the organ you're about to receive should come with a second peril of existence. But what if that wish turns into a nightmare? What if instead of saving your life, the very organ that's supposed to be your salvation turns into your worst enemy? That's the terrifying truth Tom faced, and his story is a chilling reminder that even in the hands of the most skilled surgeons, mistakes can manifest. Mistakes that turn treatment goals into relentless nightmares. Meet Tom, a man on the brink of hope and despair. Tom became like another disabled person waiting for an organ transplant, desperate, hopeful, and scared all at once. After battling a debilitating disease that ravaged his body, Tom's last wish was for a donor organ. The day came and Tom was ushered into the running room, the sterile light fixture above him like a beacon of desire. But unbeknownst to Tom, fate has something sinister in store for him. What should have been a life-saving process has become a clinical horror story that will hang over him forever. In the fall of 2003, something unimaginable happened at Duke University when doctors were scheduled to perform a heart and lung transplant on a disabled teenager. There was a confusion of unattainable dimensions, a mistake so serious that it defied imagination. The affected person received a coronary heart and lung that did not match their blood type, which had major, catastrophic consequences. Tom's situation was eerily comparable. He too was given the wrong organ, one with a blood type that became incompatible with his own. The doctors realized their mistake only when it was too late, while the organ had already been transplanted and Tom's body was already in the confusion of rejecting it. But how should such a monumental mistake come about? How could an existence-saving procedure turn into a death sentence? When an organ with an incompatible blood type enters the body, the immune gadget immediately recognizes it as a foreign invader. What follows is nothing short of war. No, war within the frame. Desperate to protect the frame, the immune machine launches an all-out assault on the overseas organ. This is known as hyperacute rejection, a brutal and rapid reaction that can occur within minutes to hours after the transplant. For Tom, the horror began almost immediately. His body, already weakened by years of infection, now faced the wrath of its own immune system. Instead of integrating into his frame and offering a new lifestyle, the transplanted organ became the target of an all-consuming attack. Tom's condition was rapidly deteriorating, his body rejecting the organ in a terrifying and constant attack. The doctors knew that they had made a big mistake. To fix that, Tom needed any other transplant, some other grueling surgical treatment that could push his frail frame to its limits. But Tom had now become so terrible in the kingdom, so dangerously close to death, that he would not be considered a suitable candidate for a transplant in everyday situations. Yet there was no preference. The bad organ had to be removed, and the other, with any luck, like a thinking organ, had to be observed and transplanted as quickly as possible. But the current process, a second transplant in any such weakened state, becomes a lottery, a desperate roll of the dice. The risks were astronomical. Transplant patients already take a cocktail of powerful immunosuppressant pills to save you from rejection, drugs to remove them with the risk of infection, bleeding, and organ failure. For Tom, the odds were stacked against him. His body had become a battlefield, his immune machine a double-edged sword that can either save him or ruin him. Tom's story did not give up with the second transplant. In fact, his suffering had begun. The new organ, while of the same mindset, did not erase the trauma his body had already endured. The initial rejection set off a cascade of fitness problems that could haunt Tom for the rest of his life. While the second transplant was technically a success, Tom's frame was by no means the same. He faced a long and painful recovery, full of complications that became a daily war in his life. Every day turned into a whole new war against infection, against the lingering pain, against a body that had been pushed beyond its limits. Tom's new organ had a number of consequences that made him nervous. He was plagued with persistent infections, his body weakened by the very drugs that were meant to keep his organs functioning. The immunosuppressants that were speculated to protect him left him exposed to every germ, every virus, every bacteria that crossed his path. His life became a by no means endless cycle of hospital visits, treatments, and the constant fear that the next contamination might be one his body couldn't fight. But the physical toll became the best part of Tom's nightmare. The psychological scars were just as deep, if not deeper. The trauma of his botched transplant has left him in a land of perpetual anxiety, terrified that his body will fight against itself once more. Every ache, every pain, every cough sent him straight into a spiral of panic, fearing that this was the beginning of more organ rejection and another fight for his life. Tom's ordeal didn't just take its toll on his physical health, it also wreaked havoc on his metabolism. The powerful drugs he turned to led to new health problems such as diabetes and high blood pressure, conditions that would require lifelong treatment. His once strong frame is now a shadow of his former self, suffering from the effects of the transplant and medication. But perhaps the most insidious result of Tom's transplant trauma turned out to be the psychological toll it took on him. The constant fear of rejection, the tension about his health, and the know-how that an extramarital mistake had turned his existence upside down and drove him into a state of deep melancholy. Once a living and hopeful man became a shell of himself that fed on the horrors of his health. Tom's revelry wasn't just a physical affliction, it turned into a psychological one too. The trauma of receiving the wrong organ, of dealing with dying, not once, but twice, took a toll on him emotionally. He struggled with despair, haunted by the use of memories of the botched surgery and the endless pain it added. His nights were filled with nightmares, reliving the horror of the transplant, the pain, and fear that it might happen again. The mental consequences of such trauma can be devastating. Ideas like a frame have their limits, and Tom was pushed beyond his. Anxiety, depression, the constant fear that his body will betray him again. These are wounds that no surgery can heal. Tom was not the most efficient person suffering from this scientific nightmare. Doctors and scientific personnel concerned about transplants faced intense scrutiny and criticism. How should this type of catastrophic error occur in a current clinical setting? How could the affected person accept an organ with the wrong blood group? Errors that should have been prevented even by the most simple tests. An incident at Duke University, in which a disabled teen also received the wrong organ, sparked national outrage. The public demanded a solution, demanded an obligation. The clinical network was forced to face the unpleasant truth that even in the most advanced hospitals, mistakes can happen, mistakes that can cost lives. Tom's story is a stark reminder of the harsh reality of organ transplants. While they can save lives, they are also fraught with dangers that are often downplayed or neglected. The reality is that organ transplants are not just another reoccurring procedure. They are complex, dangerous, and every now and then, they could be crossed terribly badly. Even if everything goes according to plan, the road to recovery is long and difficult. The frame is definitely never the same after transplantation. The regular need for immunosuppressants, the possibility of rejection, the possibility of complications. These are the realities that every transplant patient should face. For a few people like Tom, the consequences are far more extreme, turning what was supposed to be a new lease on existence into a daily conflict for survival. Tom's life after the transplant turned into a shadow of what he used to be. The guy who wished for a new heart as soon as possible was now living in constant fear. The trauma of his botched transplant haunted him every day, a reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of scientific mistakes. The second transplant, although successful, did not undo the damage caused by the first. Tom was left with lingering health issues, a weakened body, and thoughts that were forever scarred by the experience. His story is a sobering reminder that even the most perfect scientific procedures can exhibit horrors and errors that could ruin lives. Tom's story didn't just end with his suffering, it sparked a conversation, a showdown within the clinical network to confront the risks and realities of organ transplants. An incident at Duke University where a teenage patient received the wrong organ prompted changes in protocols and strategies designed to prevent this kind of catastrophic mistake from happening again. But for Tom, the changes came too late. His life had already been irrevocably changed by a mistake that had been made. Tom's story is a cautionary tale, a warning to anyone considering an organ transplant. Although this method can save lives, it's not always without danger. The question you have to ask yourself is this: would you take the risk? Would you take it for granted that the doctors and medical staff can get it right, and that they won't make a mistake that could cost you your life? For Tom, this belief was shattered. His lifestyle changed forever as a result of a mistake that should have never happened. After hearing Tom's story, would you still trust the system? Let us know in the comments below. Before you leave, don't forget to love this video and join our channel for more stories that show the hidden truths at the end of the credits. Thanks for watching, and don't forget that not every story has a happy ending. See you next time.